Welcome back to Train Signal. You are watching the second part of the video installing remote installation services and deploying clients. In this video, we will continue with remote installation services. In the last video, we installed Windows XP Professional using RIS. In this particular video, we are going to create a client computer that has the Windows XP operating system already installed on it, and then we're going to install an application. The example of the application that I'm going to take is Microsoft Office XP. So what I'm going to do is have a computer that has Windows XP Professional already on it. In fact, that's the same computer that we created in the last lab. And then we'll go ahead and install the application Microsoft Office XP. And then we will take the image of that computer that has the operating system and the application using a program on RIS known as RipPrep. Once that is done, then I'll show you how to deploy that new client image using remote installation services as well. So let's look at our network diagram one more time. Here's our RIS server, which has all the services that we need, namely Active Directory, DNS, DHCP, and RIS already working on it. These are the services that we installed in the last few labs. Now on this client computer, I'm going to install Windows XP Professional along with along with Office XP Professional. So you'll have the operating system as well as the client too. So let me take you to the client computer to show you what I've done so far. So here's the client computer. This is the operating system that we installed in the last lab using RIS. What I've done is gone ahead and, as you can see here, new program installed. I just went ahead and installed Microsoft Office. So all the applications over here are installed so that my client computer is ready. In other words, what you would do is the following. Once you have created your base image, like we did in the last lab for Windows XP Professional, then what you need to do is go to that computer, install all the applications that you need. And again, you can install the application using any of the methods that we've talked about. You can go to each of these, to this computer and install the application using CD-ROMs, or you can let the computer start and then install the applications by using GPOs in your already deployed in your domain, or connect to a network share and install the application. What we are trying to do is create what is known as a model PC. This is the PC that will have the operating system and all the applications installed and configured exactly the way you want, so that we can take this image and then throw this image on other client computers so that they will have all the applications and the operating system installed exactly the way you want it. All right, so it's very important that you spend a considerable amount of time ensuring that the operating system is installed, all the drivers properly configured, and the applications installed as well. So having done that, we are ready to create a second image, namely Windows XP Professional plus Microsoft Office Professional as well. So let me show you how to do that. I'm going to take you back to DC1, and let's take a tour one more time to refresh our memory. In DC1, there was a second volume called E. In there was a the remote install folder was created, and in there was a folder called admin. In this folder are the administrative programs. We used this program in the last lab, remote boot floppy generator, to create a floppy disk. In this lab, we will use the program called RipPrep to actually install the application along with the operating system. So we're going to use this program soon. Taking you back, if you recall, our image was in the setup folder, English, images, and there is just one image in the folder called Windows. After we finish this lab, we'll have a second image sitting out here for us. And just to recall one more time, I'm going to minimize this and take you to Active Directory users and computers. Here's our computer object DC1. Right click, properties, and then we will go to the remote install tab. And let's go through the settings one more time. This should be checked to make sure that the server is responding to client computers. Going to the advanced settings. Now what I'm going to show you is how these names work. If you recall, in the last lab, we said that when the client actually connects to the server to get the operating system, it creates a computer name using the username, and then some numbers were padded to it. In fact, our client was called administrator1. The reason for this is, and we can customize this any way we want. I'm going to click on this customize button. The reason for this is the following. It takes the account generation codes from here. So let's go through this for a moment. The code that is currently selected is %61 username %#. And here's a legend that explains all this. For example, in our case, the code that we're using is the code username. And if you notice over here, username basically means the name of the user that is currently logged in. Here we go, user's logon name. So when we installed the client, we inserted the username of administrator. So what it did was it took the username and then inserted it as the computer name. Now before the username there is this number here 61, and that number comes from this field, n characters of this indicated field. What it does is it takes a username and takes the first 61 characters of the username. This is long enough to make sure that the entire username is selected. You can make it as long or as short as you like. So by default it picks up 61. So once again our code is percentage 61 characters username percentage, and then the pound sign is added at the end. The pound sign, like if you recall, is the incremental number, so that when the first client connects, the username, the computer name will be administrator1. When a second client connects, the computer name will be administrator2, and so forth, so that each computer gets a unique computer name by incrementing the number by 1. And this can be customized any way you want. For example, if you do not want to use the username, you want to use the last name instead, you can do that. Or you can create any other field that you wish. Okay, so I just want to show you how this can be done. Quite frankly, a lot of people just leave it the way it is and then go back later on once a computer account is created and rename that computer account to whatever you want. So this takes care of the customization of the computer account as the client joins the RISC server to start the installation. Then the client account creation. This controls exactly where the computer account for the client will be created. By default, it goes in the default directory location, which is namely computers. So that's a default location for all the clients, and by default it goes over there. If you would like to change it to something else, you can do that. One of the options is same location as that of the user setting up the client computer. So for example, if you were an administrator and your user account was under the CAOU, then the computer account will be created under the CAOU as well. Or you can actually select exactly which OU you want this to be contained in. So you click on this option, you click on browse, and then navigate the benandbrady.com domain, and then pick up exactly the container that you want, or a sub-container if that's what you want. Alrighty, so once again, this screen gives you complete control over the naming of the client computer and the location of the client computer. So I'm going to set it back to default. Go on to the next tab over here, images. This tab basically shows you the images that are currently deployed on this RISC server. We have only deployed one image in the previous lab, namely Windows XP Professional. Once we finish this lab, I'll take you back to this tool, and over here you will notice that you will have a second image over here, namely Windows XP Professional plus Office Professional. Going on to the next tab, tools. If you have any tools installed that will help you administer RISC, they will show up over here. We don't have any tools installed. This is the information about the computer object, namely DC1, and here finally are the security settings for that object. So these are the default that appear in the computer objects box in any case. What is of interest to us over here are the new clients, and the images also. We don't actually do anything over here. You can add it, but they'll be added automatically once you start deploying the image. So I'm going to click on the OK button, and then let's close this box. I'm going to minimize the domain controller screen over here and take you to the client screen this time. So this is the client like the way we deployed, along with the applications already on it. Now we are ready to take the image of this computer, namely client 1, and put it on the RISC server. Let's make sure we understand this process. Going back to our diagram over here, we are at the following stage. On this computer, I have Windows XP installed, and the application Microsoft Office XP has been installed as well. So I have the operating system and the application installed on this. Now I'm ready to take the image of this computer and throw it over there. So this process is a little bit different. If you recall, when we did the last lab, we did not require the presence of this computer at all. We simply went to our RISC server, inserted the Windows XP Professional CD-ROM, and created the base image. At this point, I do not need the Office XP CD-ROMs to be inserted over here. It doesn't work in that manner. All you do is prepare the client computer exactly the way you want, and then we're going to simply take the image of this computer across the network and put it over here. So that's what we're going to do next. Now, it is also important you understand that the program that we're going to run next does not run from the domain controller. In other words, the program that's actually going to take the image of this client computer and puts it over here is not run on directly from DC1. It is actually located on the server DC1, but you actually run the program remotely from the client computer. Once again, that's a key point to understand. So let's do that. I'm going to minimize the screen, and here is my DC1, okay? And the program that we're going to run is called reprep, and We've already done this before. In the E drive, in the remote install folder, there's a folder called let's go back. There's a folder called admin, and in this admin folder, there's a folder i386, and here's the program that I would like to run, known as riprep. As you can see from the box that pops up, it is a Windows NT remote installation services prep or preparation tool. Alright, so we're going to run this program. However, you do not run this program from, let's make sure we know which computer we are on. I'm on DC1 now. You do not double click on this program over here to run it, like you normally would expect to do any program. What you do instead is, I'm going to close this out. We need to go to a client computer. So let's go to a client computer. Okay, that's a client. We need to run this program from here. So we're going to access riprep remotely. And the way we'll do that is we'll click on the start button, go to run, and then over here, I'm going to access DC1. You will recall that, let's double click on this. So we are on the client 1 computer now. If you recall that the remote install folder was shared as REMINST. So we're going to double click on this share, and then now we'll be able to look at the same folder setup like we did before, admin, i386, and here's a program called riprep. So there we go. Once again, you need to run the program riprep from the remote computer. Let's double click on this and let's get started. So here we go. This program is now going to take the image of this computer exactly the way it is, including all the applications that have been installed on it. The applications can be Microsoft application or any other application. Just remember, once again, the limitation of RIS. It has to be either, the operating system has to be either Windows XP Professional, Windows 2000 Professional, or Windows Server 2003, any flavor in that. So let's click on the next button. And then it's asking me the name of the server that's going to hold the installation image. Of course, it's going to be DC1. That's a RIS server. It already knew the answer to that. Folder name. We're going to give this folder a name of, let's call it Office XP. Okay, so there was one folder called Windows XP. This folder will be called Office XP. It will have the image of Windows XP as well as Office XP combined inside it. Click on the next button. Friendly description. Once again, if you recall, this is what the user will see when they select the image. So let's call it Windows XP. Okay, and this is the help test, or this is the description that users will see when they select Windows XP Pro and Office XP Pro. I'm going to type over here client image for all departments. Okay, you can type any suggested message that you think will help users using RIS. Click on the next button, and now it's telling us that it detected multiple profiles. Is that okay? Well, we're not going to worry about it. Now it's telling me that a number of services are running and they need to be stopped, which is fine. The reason you're seeing all this is because I'm running this remotely. Click on the next button. It's going to stop all these services. And again, you will not actually do this lab from a remote location. I'm just showing you these things because I need to capture the screens as they show up. So it's stopping all these services. What you will actually do is go to the computer and then run the service from there. Okay, so now it's letting me know that I need to actually stop these services before this proceeds ahead. So I have no choice but to actually go and stop these services. I'm going to click on the next button and then continue with this so that I can show you the screens. And here we go. It's going to start taking the image, and then the image will be ready in a few minutes. This is again is going to take several minutes, so I'm going to stop the video over here, and then as soon as this is done, I'm going to restart the server and show you the second image that is done, and then we're going to take this image and then put it on the client. So I'm going to stop the video over here. Again, this process should take, I would say, between 15 to 20 minutes. Welcome back. The copying process just finished. It took a good 35 minutes. So let's see what has been accomplished so far. What we did was we created a model PC over here, and then we ran riprep to copy the image from here to over here. And that process just finished. So let's go back to our client computer. And here we go. That's the last message, that's the last screen that came up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close this connection over here and then shut off the computer. So let me do that in a second. Okay, I've physically done that. I've shut down the computer. It is very important that you do not start a computer at this point. As you can see, I'm in trouble already. It's not able to connect. In any ways, so what has happened so far is you have successfully created your second image. Let's see that. I'm going to go to DC1 and let's have a look at a second image. So go back to the E drive of DC1, and then over there we'll go to remote install folder, setup folder, English. I'm sure this repetition has helped you understand exactly where the different folders are. So here we go. This was our original folder, Windows, with the Windows XP professional image in it, or rather files in it, and this is the one that we just created last, and this has the differences between the first image and the second image. So what it does is it does not duplicate the copying of Windows XP professional files because it is already over here, and that's what that SIS, or single instance store service, does. Okay, so our servers are ready. Our server is now ready with 2 images. Let's observe one more thing before we continue. Let's go back to, let me close this box. Let's go back to Active Directory users and computers and see if the second image shows up under the computer account for DC1 like it should. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the computer object called DC1, which is our RIS server, go to the properties of that, and then go to remote install tab, and over here, if you recall, you need to go to the advanced settings, and in there the images are under the tab images. Simple enough. And here's the second image. Remember, we named this image Windows XP Pro and Office XP Pro. So we are ready. One critical thing over here is, let me close these boxes. In fact, I don't need anything on the server at this point. So one critical thing over here, folks, is that you must make sure that once the computer shuts down after rip prep, do not start it. Okay? Because you need to start the computer with the floppy disk that we created using the using RBFG. So the floppy disk that we created in the previous lab is now valid again if you're using it on the same computer. So start the computer with it. We will go exactly through the same process this time, except that we will now have a choice between Windows XP Professional and the second image, which is Windows XP Professional plus Office XP Professional on it. So let me show you the screens that will show up once you start the computer with the RBFG floppy disk. So going back over here, you go to this computer, the client computer where you're deploying this, start the computer with the floppy disk that you created in the previous lab using the RBFG process, and then what will happen is the following. Let me show you the screens now. Here's my first, actually before this is the screen that you will see, which looks like this. This is where the floppy disk is trying to boot the computer, obtaining an IP address, then the TFTP process starts, you press the F12 key. At this point, you will be able to log on to the server. So the client installation wizard starts, and then it lets you log on to the RIS server. We use the username administrator and the password, and there we go, in the benandbrady.com. In fact, your RIS server is listed right over here, DC1. So this lets you log on to the server. Exactly the same steps like we did in the previous lab when we installed Windows XP Professional only. After the screen, you will see a new screen now, and that screen looks like this. Let me take you over there. Here we go. Last time you never saw the screen simply because you had just one image, Microsoft Windows XP Professional. So it took you straight there. This is very similar to the boot INI file or the operating system selection screen that you see when you have a dual boot system in your computer. If you have just one operating system, there is nothing to select, it goes straight through. But if you have more than one operating system, it lets you choose between one or the other. So in our case over here, now we have 2 images. So over here you decide which one you want to deploy. So you can imagine that over a period of time, you will have several images in your network deployed on RIS server ready to be given to clients. So you will have to go down the right image, select it, and then just follow the prompts, and then the image will be deployed for you. The description that you wrote actually appears at the bottom over here. So here's the name of the image, and if you want to describe this further so that the users know exactly what applications are on this, or for yourself to keep a note so that in future if you have several images, you know exactly what is contained in which image, make sure you describe it well, because the moment you select this, a description appears in the bottom part of the screen that you do not see over here. Okay, so once again, you go through the TFTP process, you log in, you select the images, and then the next screens are as expected. Going back over here, this is the one that you saw already. This one, and then you I'm sorry. Going back over here, then you will start the process, you'll finish it, and then eventually the computer will shut down. It will restart. It will once again go through the process of copying the files. A mini setup wizard will come, And then once everything is done, you will have installed not just the operating system, but also all the applications that were on that computer. Also, please remember, the applications may be any application. You may have Adobe Acrobat on it, WinZip, it does not matter. As long as the operating system is Windows XP Professional, Windows 2000 Professional, or Server 2003 operating systems. You cannot use this for Windows 98 computers. So let's summarize this process one more time so that we know exactly what is involved in this. To deploy operating system along with applications, make sure you make a model PC. Make sure that the RISC services and all the subcomponents or the prerequisites that is required is running. Once you take the image, this is a critical step. What you do is you need to run the program called RipPrep, which actually resides on the RISC server, but you do not run it from the RISC server itself. You actually have to go to the client computer. All right, so load the go to the client computer, connect to the RISC server, and then go to the REM INST or the remote admin share, and then run RipRep from there like we did. Once you do that, the computer is going to shut down. Start the computer with the boot floppy that you had previously created. Follow the prompts. Make sure you pick up the right image, and then your application along with the operating system is now deployed. So we've gone through a lot in remote installation services. Let's summarize it one more time. Remote installation services is used to deploy operating systems. It can also be used to deploy operating systems along with applications. You always have to create the base image first. So you can create the base image for the desired operating system using the remote installation server. Once that is done, you can install applications on it and then run RipPrep to take a second image, which will actually be a difference image between the first and the second one, and that can be used to deploy applications as well. Limitations of RISC, the biggest limitations is that it supports only certain operating systems that we've gone through. The other limitations are it does take a while to install this. We're going to do, the next video actually will be deploying images using Ghost, and I'm sure some of you have already used Ghost before. It is a much faster process. This process does take a considerable amount of time to go from the server to the client. So that's one restriction. And the second, and perhaps the biggest restriction also, is the fact that it can only be used with certain operating systems. The third thing that you have to be familiar with and be aware of that is that the remote boot floppy generator can work only for certain types of NIC cards, and that NIC card must be present only on the client side. It does not matter what network interface card you're using on the server side. And this last restriction, which is new, I've not talked about this before, applies to RipPrep only. Once again, this is only if you're trying to deploy operating system along with the application. It is important to know that, let me take you to the diagram over here. These are our two computers. Now, let's say that the hard disk, the size of the hard disk on DC1 is 80 gigabyte, and then you take an image. All right, so the size of the hard disk is 80 gigabyte. If you recall, actually on DC1, you should have at least two partitions on a hard disk. The first partition where the system Windows Server 2003 is installed, and a second partition on which RISC is installed, and the two partitions have to be separate based on our previous discussion. So you have one big hard disk, 80 gigabyte, and with two partitions. Now when you take the image of this using RipPrep, this client computer's hard disk must be equal to or greater than that of the servers. In other words, if this is 80 gigabyte, this hard disk must be 80 gigabytes or more as well. Does not matter how big the image is. So in other words, if your image is just taking, let's say, 3 gigabytes, that includes Windows XP Professional and some applications that you've deployed. All you have is 3 gigabytes, and your partition size over here may be very small. It does not matter. It is the size of the hard disk that does matter between the two. So the size of the hard disk over here is 80 gigabytes. This better be 80 gigabytes as well. Now that can create a dilemma sometimes, because obviously the server will have much bigger hard disk than the client normally does. So you'll have a dilemma. In other words, if you purchase this new computer and try to install that image on this one using RISC, if this computer has a 40 gigabyte hard disk and on the client that is a sufficient size of hard disk, this process will not work, even though the size of the image may just be, let's say, 5 gigabytes. So in order to go through around this problem, which is a big restriction, is to do the following. What you do on the server is make sure there are two hard disks. The first hard disk on which the server is installed, and the second hard disk, make sure it's a smaller one. Remember, the rule is the size on the client should be equal to or greater than that on the server. So this would be a great idea to find a hard disk that is about 10 or 20 gigabytes, and chances are that most of the client computers in your network will have a hard disk of at least that size. So make that, in other words, install RISC on the second hard disk, which is the smaller of the two. Okay, and that way you'll be able to go around this restriction. So that's it for RISC for now. We have seen how RISC can be used to deploy clients in the network. I thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you very soon in the next video, which will be a similar topic, deploying clients, but that time we'll use Ghost. Thank you very much once again.